Right. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today, the next Purple 365 webinar, where we are focusing on creating accessible tourist experiences. So firstly, some housekeeping. The session is being recorded, and after the webinar, it will be uploaded to the Purple 365 portal along with some supporting learning resources. You can download this and share with colleagues within your company by accessing your company's login area. And if you don't have a login area, please just email us at hello@purpletuesday.co and we will get that information sent out to you. Captions are also enabled, so if you want to use them, you just need to switch them on and in the bottom tab on Zoom. And of course, like always, if you have any questions for us today, we will leave as much time at the very end for a Q&A, but please put these into the chat box or the Q&A box and we can then get those added to the list. Today's host is Kirsty DeGranchi, who is one of our Purple Tuesday ambassadors in Jersey, and she has lots of experience working in the disability and tourism space. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to this webinar on creating accessible tourism experiences. First of all, I just want to introduce our panelists. So we've got Shelley, who is a Purple Tuesday ambassador in Northern Ireland, an advocate, a keynote speaker. We've got Ross from Visit England, who's the accessibility and inclusion lead. Marina, the inclusive tourism manager at Visit Scotland. And Charlotte from Smartbox, which creates accessible technology to help disabled people communicate. So I'll be getting them to introduce themselves in a little more detail later on, but I just want to get you thinking about what does it mean to have accessible tourism experiences. If we can move to the next slide. So move to the next slide. Lovely, thank you. So, we've got so many beautiful places around our country. Now, I am a little bit biased. This is quite a few photos here from Jersey. Why would I not want to showcase my island? But imagine waking up one day realizing that the world that you've navigated so easily is actually full of invisible barriers. And that's the actual reality for many people living with a disability. We live in an incredible country. We should be shouting. We should be encouraging people to visit us, visit our parts of our country, and visit our places and businesses. But that takes commitment to make sure that everyone can enjoy it. And travel should be a right. It shouldn't just be a privilege. Even if it's just being able to go down the road. So if we can move on to the next slide. So why am I talking to you about accessibility? Well, this is my family. This was us all dressed up to go to the Goodwood Revival last year for my dad's 70th birthday. As you can see, we're all dressed up. Arguably, we look like a relatively normal family. But the reality is that in this photograph, every single one of us, as defined by law, has a disability. And probably for 4 out of 5 of us, that is a hidden disability. And so I just want to share with you a few things about my personal journey with disability over the years before we go into the panel discussion, just to start thinking about kind of making it personal. So if we move on. So this is my dad, David. I'm sharing his story with permission, but the reality is when I was at 8, my father had catastrophic sight loss. I can remember the last time he drove because I was in the car with him and he couldn't see the traffic lights. And he had to ask me what colour they were so that we could get home safely. He's not completely blind, but he was offered white canes, he was offered a guide dog, and the only thing he actually accepted was assistive technology, which in the 80s was pretty cutting edge. So I grew up around technology. And he was a garage owner, we had our own business, and we loved to travel. You can see there on the left-hand side, him with my son on our boat. We had a boat growing up, and we loved being out on adventures, cycling, being close to France, going away. As you can imagine, his whole life turned upside down overnight. And I now do not remember that actually happening. I know that sounds crazy. I remember him going blind. But as a young girl, all I remember was we just got on with life. And I think that's a testament to my parents in actually them understanding that we just had to adapt and get on. It must have been hugely life altering for mum and dad and navigating two young children. But the reality was, dad went off to Torquay, to what we affectionately call blind school, where actually things have changed a lot nowadays. But he went to go and learn tricks and tips as a newly acquired blind person. But he was actually, in his words, taught to be blind. And he had very much came back with fire in his belly, which probably has put fire into my belly, around actually how we just had to define life differently around his eyesight. So we had to become his eye. And we just accepted our new way of life. A few months after my dad lost his sight, we went on holiday. We went to France. Mum and dad bought a tandem. Dad sat on the back, mum sat on the front, and off we went to France, through France. But the reality is that accessibility at that point was probably not something that people really talked about, but I was certainly very aware of it as I became dad's eyes, and I had to adapt the way I was living. And then years later, if we move on to the next slide, I became a parent to Harry. This is my little boy. And as you can see, we lead a really boring life. But he was born very early, and he's an ambulant wheelchair user. He's got ADHD, he's autistic, he's got cerebral palsy, and he's got a genetic condition that's deteriorating. And, you know, he's 14 and mentally 3. But again, we have been on many adventures, and I've always taken the opinion with Harry that life wouldn't be defined by his disability, but actually we'd define our life, and we would do as much as we can and go out and achieve as much as we can together. And we make quite a team together. And as you can see probably in the second photo on the left at the top there with Richard, we have done superheroes triathlon many a time. We're always on our bike, we're always out running, we do triathlon together. And so because of that, we actually got a real privilege being able to travel. When you live on a small island 9x5, you have to get off a lot. So we do have to travel a lot, and we do have some amazing adventures. But the reality is travel is exhausting, whether it's for pleasure, whether it's for hospital, which we have to do a lot. But I've learned many hacks along the way. But even as a very organized mum and as a physiotherapist by trade, planning family holidays and planning to go away, or even just planning a trip to go to the UK for the hospital, involves spending hours calling hotels, calling campsites to make sure that where we're going actually works for our needs. Booking flights when you need special assistance, and then arriving at the airport to find that they've forgotten about you, or you've been left at the top of a flight of stairs with a wheelchair because they've gone in a different way and you haven't been told about it. Planning access tickets, making sure you've got things that allow you to get carers tickets, thinking about environment when we walk into a new environment, thinking about social stories. And for many disabled people and their families, that is the reality. Travel isn't just about the bog standard logistics or going to new places, going to tourism destinations. It's actually the emotional roller coaster of organising it, worrying about whether it's right or not, and then just making sure that you are able to enjoy that experience. And sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. It can be filled with stress, frustration, and exclusion. But the reality is accessible tourism is really an opportunity, because if we actually think about accessibility, then we can make it inclusive for all. So we move on to the next slide. Traveling and making traveling more accessible isn't just about compliance, it's really good for business. 1 in 4 people in the UK have a disability, and that does affect where they choose to stay or visit. And the reality is that disabled travellers and their family and wider family are very loyal customers. But 75% of disabled people and families will have walked away from a UK business because of poor accessibility or poor customer service. They will return to places where they genuinely feel included, and they recommend others to do the same. And I do this time and again. I've got a campsite that I use in the UK, in Europe, that I go to time and time again because I know that they understand us. So tourism businesses and the businesses associated to the tourism industry, we need to be really aware of the spending power and influence that disabled people have. And we need to think about how we can harness that. £2 billion a month is lost in ignoring the needs of disabled people in the UK. But the reality is that the combined spending power of the disabled households per year is around 274 billion. It's a huge market. Going to the next slide. And the reality is we often think of ramps and physical adjustments, but the reality is only 7% of people are actually disabled people or wheelchair users. We need to design with inclusion in mind, and that's not just physical disability. There's 850 different hidden disabilities. So if we move into the next slide. Some disabilities may be obviously physical, but if you think back to my family and my family photo, others might not be visible at all. And so we need to think about our environment. We need to think about sound. We need to think about sensory. We need to think about all the different things, communication, that help people to feel included. And whilst we might have a positive attitude and wanting to embrace people with disability, thinking about it isn't enough. We need to take positive action to do that. And we need to normalise disability. So that's why we're here today. And moving on to our panel discussion, this webinar isn't just, we can move slides, thanks. This webinar isn't just about identifying the challenges of accessible tourism. It's about exploring what are the possible solutions that can make us more inclusive and more accessible. So we'll be hearing from our fantastic panelists for the remainder of this webinar who are leading the way in making travel and tourism truly accessible and also learning about lived experience within that. But most importantly, this isn't just about a conversation. This is about a call to action. And it's about, whilst you're listening and got the opportunity to ask questions, think about what you can do to make the choice to make accessibility happen and what's the ways that you can go about that. Accessibility is a really simple tool, and one of the simple things we can think about is how can I help? What can I do to help you? So leading now into our panel, I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourself. So I think if we take down the presentation, then if we start with Shelley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, good afternoon. I'm Shelley Cowan. I'm from Northern Ireland, you can probably hear from my accent. And I was confined to bed at the age of 15 for 12 years, and then I was a wheelchair user for 10 years. I'm now an accessibility consultant and an inspirational speaker. And is that everything, or do you want to move on to the next?
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marina, do you want to introduce yourself and say what you're here for today?
Yeah, sure. My name's Marina Jaduka. I'm Inclusive Tourism Manager for Visit Scotland. I've been in this specialist role for over 7 years now. And back in 2003, we started our kind of development and focus in on accessible and inclusive tourism. I'm part of the Sustainable Growth team at Visit Scotland. So we see inclusion and accessibility very much part of sustainable growth with that social inclusion element. And we also see it as being a business resilience thing as well. If we think about COVID and how many things changed in the world, and those things have become embedded in the way we operate now as a society, which I think has supported the whole ambition towards becoming an inclusive and accessible destination. Why I'm here today, it's really just to share experiences with everyone. I always think that inclusion and accessibility is a journey. But if you're not on the journey, then you don't enjoy the view. So that's what I would say to any business that's hooked in today. If you're not on the journey, you will not get the benefit of that experience. And you won't actually build a loyal customer base, because we know from the work that we do across tourist boards in the UK that this is a loyal market. So really, that's why I'm here today.
Thank you very much. Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm Charlotte. I'm from Smartbox. I just want to acknowledge that today is the start of Autism Acceptance Month as well. So it's a great day to celebrate neurodiversity and talk about inclusion in tourism. So Smartbox, we are partners with Purple, and we create assistive technology for people who are non-speaking or minimally verbal. But what we know is that having technology available isn't always possible. It's not always practical, especially in the tourism space. So we're trying to bridge the gap between assistive technology and symbol resources in tourism to help people feel more included and communicate and participate. And as you said, Kirsty, we often think about ramps and accessible spaces for wheelchairs, but communication access is just as critical for people with speech difficulties. So very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be picking up on that later on around communication. Ross.
Hi, thanks, Kirsty. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to be part of this important Purple Tuesday webinar. I'm Ross Calladine. I'm the Accessibility and Inclusion Lead at Visit England, and also have a voluntary role with the Cabinet Office of the UK Government to be the Disability and Access Ambassador for Tourism. My role at Visit England, we play a key role in facilitating a more accessible and inclusive tourism industry. And in my role, I lead and develop different initiatives that help tourism businesses and destinations of all different types and sizes to really just tap into that high value, growing, accessible tourism market. And we're really proud to be a founding partner of Purple Tuesday. Looking forward to the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So let's start with probably one of the most important areas, which is lived experience. And I know how important that is on a personal journey, but Shelley, it would be great to hear from you around your experiences and what's some of the biggest barriers that you faced when you consider about travelling or within the tourism industry, and how have you worked around them?
Okay, well, I was a wee bit naive as a wheelchair user. I wanted to go and explore everything once I became a wheelchair user. After years of being bedbound or confined to bed, and friends were bringing postcards, and I was being sent postcards from all around the world, told everybody I was going to go to all those countries. So when I got into the wheels, and as they say, have wheels will travel, unfortunately that wasn't the case. I came up against a lot of accessibility and I suppose attitudinal barriers as well. For me to be able to go away with my carers and stay overnight, it was like 2 months of searching and sourcing and making sure that everything was adequate for my needs. To be able to go away, I had to purchase a hoist at £1,200 just to be able to be toileted and transferred. So it's extra expense. It's needing to possibly buy extra flights for your carers, extra accommodation, and it's those extra equipment that people don't actually think of. And it's all that type of thing that you don't have to think of, but to go away, sometimes a respite doesn't actually become a respite. But I'm stubborn, so I still like traveling. So there are a lot of areas that can be improved, but what I would find would be, I suppose, accessible toilets would be a main problem. Even for travelling from one destination to the next, we have very limited changing places in between, even travel and transport destinations. And it would have been toileting would have been my difficulty.
And do you find that you can easily find the information, especially let's just picking up on changing places? Because they are few and far between, but actually if you know where they are, you can plan some of your journey around that. Where do you go for that kind of information?
Thankfully, I don't need that information anymore. Yes, I still need accessible toilets. With help, I can walk now. When I was a wheelchair user, I come from rural part of Fermanagh. It's a small town called Enniskillen. There were no changing places 5 years ago. Thankfully, now there are 3. And the information is getting better. There's webs and specific apps that help you, but it is difficult making sure that it is adequate. The next changing place is 17 miles away, and I don't know anybody that would, that would go that far for a toilet. And it's just getting into people's heads that accessibility is happening, but not at the speed we need it to happen for everybody.
I think picking up on the financial burden of it as well, from a personal experience, and I've recently got it. I'm going to France in a couple of weeks. My son's hit 14, so and actually in the UK we've got it. So by default, a lot of hotels will then move children into a second room. You can't have a third child in the room. My child will always have to stay in a room with us. So at the moment, going to France, I'm having to buy 2 rooms and move in with my son in one and my husband in another. And the cost of that is quite considerable. And so again, but equally, I'm going to a lovely place for Christmas, a hotel, and we contacted them and explained the situation. And lo and behold, they've managed to accommodate us and not even charging for that accommodation. And it's been the difference between going away for Christmas to a beautiful castle in the English countryside to not. And we've never done that before, and it's a real special treat. But it wouldn't have happened had that particular business been so accommodating of us and listening to us.
It is. The expense and accessibility barriers are at the point that it could actually cause non-participation within travel. And if it doesn't cause that, it definitely reduces the amount of travel that I would have been able to do. And that's unfortunate. We just want to be out in the world like everybody else. And there are a lot of barriers, but there are a lot of things improving as well as we go along.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Marina and Ross, you're working across the tourism industry. What would you say are the most frequent accessibility challenges that you come across? And what have you seen businesses do to overcome them? Oh, Marina, I think you're on mute.
Do you want me to go first and then Ross can come in?
Yeah.
So we have done over a number of years research out to different disabled groups, because obviously when we talk about accessibility, there isn't just one person in mind. There are multiple requirements. But one of the things that's come back consistently and comes back consistently from Ewan's Guide, which is the review site for disabled people by disabled people, is the lack of information, the lack of reliable, sort of almost quality assured information, and it's information in detail. So it's that's one of the sort of big barriers. And we find even in projects that I work with, when I do some desk research, I'm always so sort of taken aback at how some businesses really undersell themselves in that space. Some of them are doing some great work in that space, but they don't really communicate that through their digital platforms. So that's a big barrier. The second thing that we've found is customer service. So again, it's making frontline staff confident in dealing with a wide range of people who, as we've already said, many have hidden non-visible disabilities. So it's just approaching people in that sort of open way, open questions, and maybe just being aware of some of the things that can help people across the different disabilities as well. So these are the two kind of top things. What we found businesses are doing, attractions in particular in Scotland, are amazing at thinking about inclusion. And I would say that our attractions in Scotland have done some fantastic work. They obviously are reliant on incoming visitors, but they also, to be sustainable across the year, they rely on locals going into attractions. So they're very aware of being accessible to all. So some of them have got some great new initiatives that they put into place, like quiet hours for people with autism or dementia-friendly services. Many of them have started to have quite detailed information on their website around their accessibility facilities and services. And some, again, after COVID, when people couldn't actually visit, the whole kind of virtual tour thing took off. And I think that's something that's remained. And because the feedback from attractions in particular, people that need to know the sort of how the attraction's laid out and what facilities are there before they go, those virtual tours are transformational. And there's been organisations that have started up to provide that service to the hospitality sector, which again more and more of them are looking at virtual tours to add that extra layer of information. So these are some of the things that we've seen come through, which is fantastic. Sorry, just on the Changing Places toilet, in Scotland, there's a new fund that's just been announced by Scottish Government. So the Changing Places Consortium in Scotland is just doing a bit of a survey at the moment and they're really looking for anyone, businesses or destination groups, to go in and tell them about, answer the questions about the Changing Places toilets. But that's a great fund, and it's hopefully going to spearhead even more Changing Places toilets around Scotland. So just wanted to say that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Ross, in England, what are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. And it probably won't be a surprise that I'm going to build on points that Marina has said. The barriers, they tend to be very similar, not just across the UK, but even globally. So I am going to say information. That repeatedly comes up, the lack of quality accessibility information on tourism venues disempowers people to take trips. But the opposite's true. If you can provide clear information, primarily people are looking on your venue website, so don't bury it in the footer. Make sure it's prominent, easy to find. Recognize that not all people with access requirements relate to the language of disability. So don't just call it disability information, speak more broadly. Your access for all, your accessibility page, make sure it can be found in that top menu. And really that empowers people to make personal choices, because impairment and health conditions affect everyone differently. If you know one person with multiple sclerosis, you might know someone else with MS that's at a totally different stage of their journey with that health condition. So their access requirements could be very different. So giving this information, making it easy to find, it empowers people to make trips that they otherwise wouldn't have taken. And speaking to Shelley's point, unfortunately, the statistics in tourism do show that 50% of people who identify as disabled did not take an overnight trip in England in the last 12 months. And that compares to 35% of non-disabled people. And that's because of barriers, whether they are physical barriers, attitudinal barriers, technological and digital barriers. And that's where we want to help the industry. We want to help everyone on the call today just to chip away at those barriers. And then you'll see, more loyal and repeat visits from this market.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the information and just making it clear is so important. I was chatting with a hotel recently who said, we've got a restaurant and a bar, a speakeasy bar at the very bottom of some stairs. We physically cannot change that. It is down a set of stairs. There is no way we can get people in and out unless you do the stairs. And we're worried about it because it's inaccessible. And I said, well, you need to just write that on your website. Does it say it on that website? And then but we can help you have an experience in one of our other bars. And they hadn't thought about that actually they could just be honest. And sometimes honesty is better than nothing, because actually having to phone and ask the question is more embarrassing than being able to go, oh, look, well, actually, we're not going to go there because they have got this bar which is inaccessible, but we can get to that bar. It's in another part of the hotel. Charlotte, do you have anything to add at all on this?
What you were just saying, Ross, about access for all and inclusion, I think is so important, because when obviously my focus is around communication, and obviously we're talking about the disabled community, but there's also people who don't have English as a first language who could benefit from technology or from solutions in the industry to help them understand and communicate and participate. So it's not, whilst it is focused on the disabled community, it is also people with other barriers that are not associated with disability. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
I think the other thing that we have to sort of address, the elephant in the room, is that we have an ageing population in the West. And no matter how healthy and fit people are in older life, you cannot stop the aging process. So, you will have people that have sight impairment, you will have people that will have hearing disabilities, and, the physical as well. So I think if you think of this as at its broadest sense, how are you making your business accessible for customers that are really coming through the door now and will continue to come through, and proportionally they could be the majority of your customers. And if you get a group like us all, we all have family members that fall into this market. If you're thinking about groups, then you start to see how it's really important to start your journey. You're not going to do everything tomorrow, but maybe just focus in on one or two things this year that you can focus in on and start to develop. I think what we've seen, and Ross has probably seen it as well, that once businesses have started, it's a snowball effect, because they start getting real strong positive feedback from customers. It affects other customers, because if you do something for one set of customers, it benefits everyone. And that motivates the business to actually do more. And I think it is that sort of journey that we really try and push. As a tourist board, we'd love just to say you have to do X, Y, and Z, but we have to appreciate that businesses are at different levels, different scales, different budgets. So where can we make the biggest difference? And it's really trying to encourage them to address their information, address their customer service, and then start to build out from that. And so when they're doing refurbishment, think about inclusive design. Think about the interventions that you can make. Think about your technology. Are you actually communicating in the right way?
Thank you, Marina. So just picking up on that, accessibility and inclusion really doesn't have to be big things. It can be very small. It can be very simple, quick wins. So that can improve the experience, improve it for everyone. And I personally think inclusive, accessible customer experience is just good customer experience. Shelley, can you I'm going to go around each of you so you can start thinking about it, but what would you say is maybe some really quick wins from your point of view that some people
I suppose disability awareness training would be a major one, so that every guest, every customer that comes through your door, no matter whether they have a hidden disability or it's a seen one, every single person that comes through that door is going to have a specific need, whether that be a dietary requirement, whether that be a mobility issue. Just to see your guests as, what can I do to help? And maybe even just be honest and say, look, we may not have all that you need, but we are willing to help you. Sometimes that extra mile or the smile or a bit of kindness goes a long way. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is often for many people who are living with a disability, life is just quite hard. And you're also battling just to get, the basic stuff. So actually just some kindness can make a number of times I've been moved to tears by just someone, having done a really horrific travel through airports and everything else, and someone just asking you something really simple, or giving my child a chocolate bar when we walk through the hotel door, and it's given me 5 minutes of quiet. I'm just home from England at the weekend, and I was staying in a hotel, and the wee lady realised at reception that I was needing support by my carer. I had my bag on my back, which is fun to even get that on when you can't stand, and my carer, and she put both of us into her car and she drove us to the train station. And I just cannot believe, now that kindness is worth more than any accessibility. Sometimes it's just seeing the guest as a guest and seeing what you can do to help. It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Charlotte?
Yeah, one of the things we're really focused on is that symbol-based communication. So for people who are non-speaking or minimally verbal, which is around 330,000 people in the UK, having additional resources in the venue, on menus, in your signage to help understand and communicate and participate is really valuable. And that's around 1 in 200 children who need alternative communication technology or methods. And a lot of those people need symbols to support their understanding understanding language and literacy. And we actually all use signage and symbols all the time for fire exits and toilets and everything you can think of. But we know that we want to communicate with more than just what we need or just to absorb information. We want to communicate that we're happy, that we're excited, that we're hungry. So having symbol resources around your venue really makes people more included in that process. They can participate more effectively. And it's really simple because you're already putting up signage, you're already putting up information, and it's just going that extra mile for people that use symbols as their communication method.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must say, I had a brilliant experience just around Christmas time with one of the London theatres, and we'd bought for my son a trip to Back to the Future. And when I contacted them, they sent me a social story around visiting Back to the Future. Not only did they that, they then did the step-by-step guide. And that went into my son's Christmas present.
Oh, brilliant.
And it meant when he opened it, and I use symbols for my son. So we use that. He does a timetable every week so he knows where he's going. That meant he could read when he opened his card. It was magical because it meant he could read what his Christmas present was without me having to tell him. And he knew what he was doing. And for the weeks leading up to it, it helped prep. And it's such a simple thing, that can make such a big difference. And like you say, for a lot of children now, they're using it in mainstream schools and things like that. So it's becoming the norm. So Ross and Marina, what about your thoughts from an industry point of view?
Yeah, shall I go?
Yes, please do.
There's lots of top tips and action checklists available in Visit England's Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Toolkit, and maybe I'll touch on that for a later question. One of them, sticking with the theme of information, is to get a detailed access guide. And Visit England and also Visit Scotland have partnered with Access Able, who are one of the leaders in this space. They've been finessing their approach to collecting quality access information for different venue types over the last 25 years. And all the information they collect has been requested by people with a range of different health conditions and access requirements. And their website's now getting over 6 million hits a year. So through the partnership that we have with them, there is an information portal for businesses in England and in Scotland. And I just encourage anyone on the call today who doesn't have a detailed access guide to check out that information portal, get a quotation to get one of these detailed access guides, and just build it into your future plan for the year ahead. Add that link to that guide prominently on your website, and you will be instantly empowering people to take more trips to your business.
And since Ross has covered the Access Able partnership, I'll maybe just cover a little bit about the customer service. We have a welcoming all customers training course, which we developed with an organisation called Welcome to Excellence, and it gets absolutely fabulous feedback. And that's really positioning customer service in that space. Because a bit like you've said, that it's just about good quality customer service. But it's an all-day course, and businesses can sign up to that. It's a very small session that they do 16 people around the table, and it's a fantastic day that works through every single thing from verbal communication, non-verbal communication, how you welcome people, the kind of questions that you need to ask, and a little bit about different disabilities and what barriers individuals might face in that space and how you can overcome that. And I would encourage anyone that's in hospitality, if you haven't thought about a training course, that one is particularly good because it is focused in on customer service, frontline staff, and it covers the whole spectrum of accessibility and inclusion. Also covers digital, a little bit about digital accessibility as well. We have a toolkit as well, like Ross, we've just started developing that. We've got a new business support hub. So if you Google business support hub, you will find it, Visit Scotland. And there are sections in there around customer service tips. We share the ones that Mike has on his YouTube channel for frontline staff, but we also have a link to the Welcoming All Customers. And we will also have things like inclusive design guidance and tips as well. So you'll find across the UK, all the tourist boards are really focused on driving improvement in this space. And we're all trying to do our best to make it easier for businesses to kind of engage and kind of give them the sort of tools to drive their inclusive and accessible credentials. So that's what I would say. Oh, the other thing is, in this space, you could think about encouraging an individual to volunteer as an accessibility champion or accessible or inclusive champion, or as some attractions in Scotland have done, is they've created a volunteer internal group where you get people coming together that might have a hidden disability themselves, and they start to talk amongst themselves and then report back into management about things that they could do. And that works really well, encouraging and using your own staff to generate changes.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that kind of inviting people into your business to have an honest conversation, let them experience what you've got to offer, and then be open to an honest conversation. And I think often, sometimes, we end up butting heads with the disabled community sometimes, because actually, it is tough, and then you go in and you don't have a great experience. And that can often be kind of really taken down a level by actually just going, do you know what, come into our business and let's be honest about what we've got wrong here. And I think, all right, and more often than not, there is a lot right. We often focus on the wrong. So just moving, we touched on it briefly earlier, and I want to leave some time for questions. So please start putting those in the chat if you do have some. But we talked a lot about communication and good communication and how that can improve accessibility and inclusion. But I just want to touch a little bit more on the kind of more specialist area of that. And Charlotte, maybe you could tell us a little bit more around assisted communication boards and technology and how that might benefit tourism destinations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to be aware of is that someone visiting your venue or your business might be using technology for communication. So they might be using a speech generating device, they might be using an iPad, they might be using text to speech on their phone. And for some people, they might not have experienced that. Your staff may have never experienced that. So first and foremost, it's about educating your team that this is a way that people might communicate and participate in your business. And for some people, communication with very specialist technology like eye tracking technology, alternative access methods, it can be quite slow. So your team need to be patient and aware that somebody is communicating, and it may take them a bit longer to ask questions or to communicate with your team. So just creating that awareness. And then the second element is bridging the gap between someone using technology to communicate, but it's not practical that they have that technology with them all the time, but they might have a benefit of having some resources that are very similar to technology they use in your venue to bridge the gap between how they communicate and what you can offer them. So with their software or their device, they might not have relevant words for your venue. You've got specialist equipment, or you've got particular locations in the venue. You might want some signage with symbols to support that, so they can use that solution instead of the technology they have available to them. So it's just bridging those gaps and making sure your teams are aware that people do use technology to communicate, or other methods, pointing, eye movements, all sorts of different ways.
And I guess not being scared or worried if someone's coming through the door with that is saying, it's back to the how can I help you? What can I do to help understand? How are we going to be able to communicate best? And I know recently, and I don't know this in the UK, but in Jersey we've got a charity that's currently putting up communication boards in so in playgrounds. We've got one now in the airport. I believe there's one going into the harbour. And again, it's normalising that, isn't it? And the symbols and kind of really making it as that it's there, but equally, if you're having a bad day, especially with a child, which is where I come at it from, being able to go over to something like that and actually have something there that just, if nothing else, they see something that they recognise and it normalises.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely becoming more mainstream, I suppose, and with assistive and with tech we're all moving in tech world, aren't we? So there's a lot more coming out, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. For children, especially using symbol resources in school, when they then go out and about to the playground or, they're out with their friends or their family, seeing symbols in everyday life is so empowering because you can just normalize it and it becomes part of everyday life for everybody. And it's just great to see, loads of kids gathering around a symbol board, pointing at what they can see, talking about being excited or wanting to run faster or whatever it may be, and using that solution to communicate when they haven't got speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shelley, what have you been seeing, just talking about innovations and technology and so on? What are you seeing out there when you're traveling that is helping to make travel and tourism more accessible?
One thing that just warms my heart is that a lot of organizations want to be accessible. They want to be including everyone. And I think it's definitely trending and it's definitely priority out there. More and more people with disabilities want to be out traveling. They're seeing more people doing it. And I believe that the more that people are out and about, the more the improvements will happen. There's definitely a lot of activities that are improving. There's so many more activities out there than 5 years ago. There's accessible bikes. There's they're starting to try and get it into forest parks. There's so many, especially in the sporting world. The only thing that would concern me is there's all these competitive sports for accessibility and for disability. But the hospitality end and the accommodating these groups is very difficult if we can't get them for individual use. That's where I feel especially is difficult. The one thing that I would say is being welcome to everyone is a big thing, because I was, as a wheelchair user, I was asked to please leave a restaurant as I was taking up too much space. But I think people are starting to realise you can't do that type of thing anymore, and people are very much more able to stand up for themselves, and not take that discrimination, I took it years ago because it was the done thing, but people are advocating now, and people understand to be inclusive, you can't do that. And I always say, in an industry that's meant to be all inclusive or all welcoming, we need to know that we're not just being all inclusive for food and drink, and it needs to be to accommodate everyone. But there are definitely big improvements all over, and it's just going to take time to everybody can be included.
And I guess with technology as it is, and with online and everything else, that does open up the world to a lot more people, because then even from home you can use your assistive technology to access the world, plan,
absolutely,
and so on. And again, it's about making sure that then when you get to that destination, you can continue to use it.
I use voice assisted technology myself. I was able to do a master's through it. Technology is branching out so unbelievably quickly, and let's hope accessibility in the physical environment goes at the same rate.
And Ross, what are you seeing in the industry from innovative technology?
Yeah, I would focus on design-led accessibility. So I think many operators have seen back in the day quite medical-looking environments, and particularly when you think about the bathroom, the bathroom in a hotel or accommodation, lots of grab rails, the flooring, just the different types of materials in the past could look very medical. And obviously, businesses are trying to drive revenue, so they don't want to be thinking, to create this space is potentially not going to work for some people because it's going to be off-putting. And we've come forward massively, I'd say, in the last decade. And one example I'll give in England is a hotel, or two hotels, used to be under the Hotel Brooklyn brand. They're now under the Voco brand in Manchester City Centre and in Leicester. And they've worked with a company called Motion Spot to create very design-led accessible bedrooms, and they call them Liberty Suites. And they followed a concept called universal design. And that's where they've created rooms that are stylish, and inclusive for everyone, rather than just being exclusively for disabled people. And what that means is that those bedrooms drive the highest occupancy rates of any room type across the hotel. And the innovation particularly comes in because they have ceiling tracked hoists. Now, there is an absolute lack of ceiling tracked hoist provision within serviced accommodation, and it's really disempowering people that need that facility to take trips. So what they've done is that they've doubled it up so that it's integrated into the ceiling, it's recessed, and for anyone who doesn't need it, it doubles up as a very attractive lighting feature. But actually, if you need the hoist, it's concealed in a cupboard over the bed, and it uses that lighting feature as the track, and it opens up accessibility for people that just otherwise would not be able to stay in hotel accommodation. So that hotel is driving an extra £217,000 revenue in its first year because it got accessibility right from the start. So I'd really challenge any worries about medical looking design now. It can look very attractive for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just aware of the time. So I think there's been one or two questions. Some have been answered in the chat, but if anyone wants to ask any questions, we've kind of got 5 minutes left. One was just around the welcome all customers training, and that is in England too. So that was one question. And so question from Liz: what can businesses in rural and remote places do to become more accessible? Shelley, I feel like this is probably one for you.
Yeah, I come from probably the most rural part of County Fermanagh, but I would say again, being welcome. I would, as many of your staff, be understanding with accessibility training, but even down to being in a restaurant, a table, a simple table where a wheelchair user can fit in underneath it without their knees being hit. I have more bruises, I call them memories, but bruises from just not being able to sit under a table. Even something simple as a task of somebody lifting your bag or helping you to the room. You know, it's those type of things that cost absolutely nothing. Yes, you can go down the route of what I would love in every hotel or every accommodation would be a change in place. Imagine how many people, wheelchair users or those with limited mobility, could attend weddings, occasions, birthday parties that physically can't do it at the minute. The amount of people who have to rearrange their venue just to suit their granny, or there's somebody of their relatives that can't attend, those type of things. A change in place in every accommodation would be absolutely fantastic. That may not mean that they stay overnight, but they at least get to stay during the day. Dietary requirements would be a major one for me. A lot of people with disabilities have a lot of dietary requirements. Even just to have something that's gluten-free, dairy-free or whatever, and explain it on the list. But again, it all falls down to make sure you adequately and realistically describe what you have on offer throughout the whole hotel or accommodation. That would be.
Any other comments at all from the panel?
I think for a lot of people, when they're going to a new place, a new city or a new destination, they're doing their research. So putting information out there and making sure that if they phone your business, your staff are well equipped to answer questions they may have, because ultimately people need to plan for their experience more than everybody else. So it's been mentioned already, but having that information really readily available for visitors is crucial wherever you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that certainly, I travel up to the Outer Hebrides a lot. So from one remote island to another remote island, and just having lots of information along the way that I know I can ask, but also, just knowing what those routes are and how you can do that easily, especially through the airports. For me, that's 4 flights sometimes, or 3 flights and a ferry journey with all our gubbins. So it's a lot. So yeah.
I think to also know your accessibility activities locally around your area, so that you can attract people with access needs to different sites near you, so that knowing what is out there around you as well is also useful.
The other thing about rural or more inaccessible locations, it's maybe as a business in those locations, is maybe putting a list of wheelchair accessible taxi companies on your website and make sure that people know how to get from whatever, the bus station, train station, to your venue using a taxi firm that actually has like wheelchair accessible taxis. The other piece of technology that sometimes that we see increasingly used is Welcome Me, which is an app which helps the venue connect in with an individual. So it's like a personal service for disabled people, where the person registers on the app, describes their particular disability or illness. The individual can then link up with the front line staff at a venue and actually almost book in a time to visit. So the information staff can be fully briefed on what that individual needs by the way of assistance when they arrive. So more and more venues throughout the UK are actually adopting that technology. So it's called Welcome Me. And it's Gavin Neat who has that. He's based in Scotland, and that's a really good piece of technology which is connecting people directly. So I kind of call it like a personal service, where you're actually making an appointment to go and see something, and the staff are aware of your arrival.
Thank you, Marina. It's kind of answered one of the other questions we've had from Olivia, which is, do you have any recommendations for websites or media publications to proactively advertise accessible experiences? So that's one. I don't know, I'm aware of the time now, but is there any others that kind of really leap out immediately?
Enable magazine is another one. There are a couple. We could probably put that into anything that's shared later, but there are a few magazines that specialise in getting information out to customers. But Enable magazine, I think there's one other one that we've used before to advertise in. It's got good circulation.
Yeah, we do list a range of marketing avenues to reach this market specifically in our toolkit. Able magazine, Disability Review. There's a few specialist publications, and they're always looking for advertorial. So you could offer a competition, you could offer a discounted stay or a free stay, and it would give you great coverage within the readership of those magazines.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think from the other side of it, one of the things that's been a real game changer for me is an access card, where as a disabled person, you go through and you've got a card that then kind of puts symbols on there of different things that you might need. So you're not constantly having to go. So I would really recommend, really understanding what the access card is. So I'm just aware it's just 1 minute past 2. So just quick fire. One thing to take away. So from each person on the panel, that people can take away to improve accessibility. So quick fire, Charlotte.
I would just start simple, start small, and don't overthink it. Just go step by step of small changes you can implement, and it's not scary and overwhelming.
Brilliant, thank you. Ross.
Don't wait until you feel your product is perfect before you communicate it. Excellence doesn't require perfection. You'll never be accessible to everyone, but you can all be accessible to someone.
Ellie.
I would say the biggest thing would be ask. If you're not sure, ask the person and welcome them like every other guest, and just ask them, is there anything I can help you with? And learn from all the feedback, take the feedback on board and put it into action.
Brilliant, thank you. And Marina?
I would say take 5-10 minutes, look at your website. Are you promoting the services that you offer? And are you showcasing any accessible room that you have with pictures? Focus on your website. That's your starting point. Make sure you're communicating what you have accurately.
Thank you. And I think for me, it's just about being honest and upfront. And if nothing else, just think, how can I help you? Because it doesn't matter whether you've got a disability or not. How can I help you opens up the world and it opens up the doors. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists and for the time that you've given to this. Thank you to each of you that have listened into this. The next webinar is on the 22nd of April, and that is going to be on the exploration of the impact of noise and neurodiversity, which sounds really interesting. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.